These are the consequences of laws, or imprisonment and violence. When those are constructed by a mythology, the founding fathers understood that's not a good idea. We need to be honest about the fact that we don't really know what the founding fathers would have wanted. And to interpret what somebody else wanted who is no longer here just creates a gigantic opportunity for bias. So I feel like I take a pretty principled stance when it comes to religion and the church. It's caused a little bit of controversy in my own show and a bit of a shit show here and there. But when you think about separation of church and state, it's at this point it's deeply embedded in the tradition of the United States. I think it's a good idea from both sides. I think it's a good idea from the church. I think it's a good idea from the government to say, hey, you guys can do your thing over there as long as you're not breaking any laws. We'll stay out of it, and you don't have to pay taxes, which I kind of hate, but it is what it is. And the church saying to the federal government, like, hey, we're not gonna try and just overstep. But lately, and it's just happened. It kind of happens in like pushes over time. This idea that church and state need to be intertwined has become more and more popular on the far right. I think when we think about this and look at separation of church and state and its role in our country, we got to understand that when we're thinking about the founding fathers and what those people meant and how they thought and the world they lived in, we do need to put it in context. And I don't know if it's the best idea to really take the opinions around church and state that seriously from people that weren't far removed from a time where people were burning witches. Like, I think that if you're, like the QAnon of the time, in the 1700s were like people that thought it was a good idea to burn witches. Like your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving would be talking about how, it's not the satanic pedophile cult, it's the witches. Like, it's the same thing, right? Like that's the person at like your first Thanksgiving, the crazy uncle was like, yeah, we need to burn those fucking witches. Like maybe that era isn't the time to emulate when it comes to how we construct a society. But I'm going to play a few clips here from some of my favorite far righties, Lauren Boebert and Charlie Kirk, as well as somebody from OAN. So let's hear what Lauren Boebert has to say about separation of church and state while doing something at a Cornerstone Church, Cornerstone Christian Center. I'm sure this is here in Colorado.
The reason we had so many overreaching regulations in our nation is because the church complied. The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church. That is not how our founding fathers intended it. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk that's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and it means nothing like what they say it does.
So the words separation of church and state aren't in the Constitution, in the same way the word abortion or terminating pregnancy isn't in the Bible. But you see what I'm saying here? When you're interpreting old ass shit, like you gotta use the best context clues you can to kind of infer what they mean. So let's go on and listen to Charlie Kirk here.
Well, it's so sick because South American and Central American countries are actually very religious and very Catholic. So they're going into religious countries with almost missionary fervor to go and try to make these countries less religious. And again, there is no separation of church and state. It's a fabrication. It's a fiction. It's not in the Constitution. It's made up by secular humanists. It's derived from a single letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Convention. Of course, we should have church and state mixed together. Our founding fathers believed in that. We can go through the details of that. They established literally a church in Congress. Anyway, separate issue. The point, though, is that this is acting like a religion, though, isn't it? If we live by their own false premise of separation of church and state, then why on earth and how on earth why would they want to go bring this belief to other countries? I mean, they're almost kind of as if it was the 1400s and they're sending missionaries to the New World filled with despotic, nihilistic atheism and humanism. I mean, what's the thought process behind this?
Yeah, well, such a strange idea here, Charlie. I mean, about atheists, humanists, and this thing is it's an ultimate straw man. Like you're straw manning people that don't believe in your mythology as if they are less than. So when you talk about church and state, do you mean all churches? So Islamic churches, Buddhist meditation centers and retreat centers, fundamentalist Mormons, like all of them? So all of them should be intertwined in the government, all of them. Or is it your specific blend of Christianity, right? Because to act that Christianity was the same as it now as it is in 1776 is incredibly naive. Again, even at that time, there was a wide variation between different types of Christianity, different types of belief systems. And it's not really abundantly clear that these founding fathers you deify were even that religious in the first place. And we're going to talk about that. But this also emboldens things like this mindset. And you can see the talking points are very much the same. It's not in the Constitution. It was in a letter. Like they're coordinated and they're very organized, like I said. So let's listen to this lady from OAN, Allison Steinberg, when she went home to California.
To San Diego. And guess what I came home to be greeted with? This bullshit. What the hell is that?
It's a pride flag. She's in San Diego, California, and this is like an old school pride flag too. This is probably some like conservative gays here because they don't have all the other stuff in there. This is just like classic pride.
Huntington Beach is the town of good old-fashioned, hardworking American people. The people that worked all through the COVID lockdowns. Yes, that's
So gay people can't be hardworking Americans? People that are proud of being gay? So you can be proud to be an American, which you didn't choose. Unless you immigrated here, like I said, you can be proud to be an American, right? I'm proud to be an American because at least I know I'm free, right? And as Jordan Peterson would say, do you remember when pride was a sin? Weird. But you can't on your own property, right? On your own property, put up a pride flag? This bullshit, Allison? This bullshit? Hardworking Americans can't be gay. Hardworking men can't suck a little dick. Hardworking women can't munch a little rug, dude. Come on.
Huntington Beach never shut down through any of the COVID nonsense.
What does that have to do with gay people?
Peddling this garbage? What the hell?
Listen, I'll say this right now about the gays, by the way, and gays out there, comment on this video and let me know if I'm right here. The gays out there, especially the gay men, gave the least about COVID from my understanding. Because the thing about gay men is they actually dealt with a real pandemic. You know, the AIDS crisis. Like their friends, like a lot of their friends, if they were old enough, and this is still, they understand this shit, right? The gays were still partying, all right? They were still doing nose beers. They didn't give a They were pissed. So really, I think you should align yourself. If you were anti-lockdown, you should align yourself with the gay boys. You know what I mean? Why wouldn't you? I did. And here I am. I'm doing great.
What is this? The only flag that's together is that American flag. This is a disgrace to our city, and it should be taken down immediately. Whoever the hell is running this town needs to be fired.
Okay, so that's Allison Steinberg from OAN. So this is like, and I feel like these are all kind of the same things. They're all kind of emboldened versions of one another, right? Like Lauren Boebert, Charlie Kirk, who, by the way, has packed on a few pounds, boy. You might want to get in the gym, my friend. Started to look real Trumpy-dumpy over there. Anyways, moving on. And then Allison Steinberg, who's kind of a babe, but also crazy. Like, can you imagine if you swipe right on this broad in Huntington Beach, and then you're like, oh, hey, like, what do you do for a living? She's like, gay people. This is bullshit. And like, what? I'm just trying to get to know you. Yeah, well, there's a pride flag outside, and I'm upset about it. It's like, well, it was nice to meet you, Allison. I'm going to go ahead and off. Like, can you imagine? She's like catfishy with her craziness. So anyways, now the separation of church and state. Let's talk about this. Where can I find separation of church and state in the Constitution? Answer. Although most people believe the words separation of church and state are actually in the Constitution, the words cannot be found there. Rather, they are words penned by Thomas Jefferson in a letter which explains the First Amendment of the Constitution, or at least Jefferson's view of it. The actual words in the First Amendment of the Constitution read as follows: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So when I read that, I think, okay, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. So nothing involved, like they're not going to get involved in making a recognized religion or prohibiting a religion from existing, right? And recognizing itself. That's what I read in that, right? Which is separation of church and state.
Secularism is wonderful for government.
In the fall of 1801, the Danbury Convention, Danbury Baptist Association sent Jefferson a written address congratulating him on his election, third president of the United States. In his reply on January 1st, 1802, Jefferson penned these now famous words: I contemplate with sovereign reverence the act that the whole American people, which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting a free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. Okay. According to the Library of Congress in 1802, presidential replies to public addresses were prime vehicles for the expression and dissemination of partisan views. Such replies would be carefully drafted with a view towards advancing the writer's political agenda. All right. Now, so, okay, well, that's one person. That's one of our founding fathers, which that term wasn't even coined until much later, right? They didn't really know they were the founding fathers when they were the founding fathers. So we're going to read through the most common founding fathers and what their religious beliefs were, and just got to get a little bit more context on that. And again, we're doing a little bit of a history lesson here, but that's okay. And again, if you want to take anything from an old book, right, or an old document, you can find a quote from somebody who's not around anymore that you can't ask their opinion and make it mean whatever you want it to mean, right? You can do that with self-help. You can do that with religion. You can do that with politics. You can figure it all out, right? Out of context things. You ever see those like out of context Hitler quotes? You can see like, it's like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And it's like Adolf Hitler. It's like, well, you can find anything out of context and make it mean what you want it to mean. So let's go through here and just read a few about the most common 9 founding fathers and kind of where they were at on the religious spectrum. Because at the time, religion was a much more raw experience, and again, there were very many variations within the Christian specifically orientation. George Washington, as required by colonial Virginia law, he was baptized as an infant into the Anglican Episcopalian Church, which he occasionally attended in his earlier adult years. According to his diaries, on rare occasions after the early 1770s, he attended the state-supported Episcopalian Anglican Church, a Roman Catholic church, and at least once a Quaker meeting. Washington never participated in Christian communion, calling into question any formal religious affiliation as an adult, and in his day was often called a deist. In all his voluntary writings, he referred to Jesus Christ only once, impersonally, in relation to a treaty with the Delaware Indians. Now, a deist, I didn't really know what this was, one who believes in the existence of a personal God, but in few or none of the more special doctrines of the Christian religion. One who holds some of the more general positions of the Christian faith concerning the deity, but denies revelation and the authority of the church. And another meaning here is one who holds the opinion that there is a God, but no divine providence governing the affairs of men. One who holds that God is not only distinct from the world, but also separated from it. And the synonyms here are atheist, skeptic, and infidel. So keep that in mind. Now, John Adams, as a non-traditional Unitarian, his views fell outside the realm of the Orthodox Christianity. Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was a leading deist who voiced respect for Jesus as a human teacher of moral truths, only occasionally attending church services and rejecting the doctrinal teachings of the Bible. Other than Baptists, who loved Jefferson for allying with them on enacting religious liberty for all and church-state separation in the new American nation, many Christians of the day dismissed Jefferson as a heretic, infidel, and even an atheist. Okay. So we're getting to it here, right? And honestly, Thomas Jefferson seems to have I like the grasp that he seemed to have on Christianity. That's kind of more, I feel, a much more appropriate way of viewing that belief system. James Madison, a leading deist. Madison sometimes attended Episcopalian Anglican Church, yet strongly opposed efforts by church leaders to extend colonial theocracy to the new nation, instead working along Baptists to enact religious liberties for all and church-state separation. John Jay, an Anglican. Jay is the only one of the primary founding fathers who could have legitimately been considered an Orthodox or evangelical Christian. Alexander Hamilton, not a church member, Alexander Hamilton was known for exploiting Christianity for political purposes, although he evidenced some semblance of personal religion after 1801. Benjamin Franklin, baptized as an infant as required by colonial law and raised as an Episcopalian, Franklin became a deist in adulthood and rarely attended church. 1 month before his death, he wrote a letter in which he summarized his creed as belief in a creator of the universe and the moral teachings of Jesus, but not in the divine Christ. In addition to 2 other men, James Monroe, a deist. Monroe sometimes attended the Episcopalian Church. Thomas Paine, like most of the founding fathers, Paine was a deist who was not an active churchman and who rejected Orthodox Christianity. Paine summarized his creed as, "My own mind is my own church." So when Charlie Kirk's talking about humanists, it seems like he's talking about Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers. In other words, although many Christian nationalists claim that all 7 or all 9 of the founding fathers herein listed were evangelical Christians, the claim simply does not hold water. Unless one employs a rather creative definition of Christian that would never be welcomed in today's evangelical churches. So what we're seeing here, right? And this is a common trend. The people that have the foresight and the thought to create a society, which is what these people did, they're generally kind of more of philosophers than anything else, right? And when you get down the rabbit hole, when you start embracing like philosophical thinking, dogma doesn't really do you any good. You've got to zoom out of that. That's why one of the reasons I love Alan Watts so much. Alan Watts is one of my favorite thinkers, my favorite philosopher. He's fantastic because he can zoom out and he can be irreverent when it comes to several different topics of belief systems, because the practice there is to understand why people believe what they do and then find common threads throughout them, which is something I respect and admire about him and something I try to apply to my own life. So when we look at this separation of church and state, as I said before, it may not be the best idea to really even adopt. And I can sit here and be like, well, these people agreed with me because I see some things that say that they agree more with my way of living. And it's like, well, maybe we should just make a practical decision about where we're at now and what works best now and what churches have become, right? Joel Osteen would not have been an appropriate figure in this time. You know what I mean? He's not an appropriate figure now. But the idea that you can make these people out and do some revisionist history to make them into what you want them to be is cruel and shallow-minded and short-sighted and incredibly problematic. I mean, when you start inviting religion to guide the nation through the lens of politics, like you're really opening up a can of worms. You were absolutely opening a can of worms. Like I align more with Buddhism than I do with any other belief system out there, right? It speaks to me and I understand it resonates with me. And I hope that my Christian friends have that same experience with Christianity. I really do. I think it's important to have something that you can look to and learn from, and the teachers of that religious belief like resonating with you in a way. And I think much of it is a resonance. I would not want to force Buddhism into our government. I would like to see some more Buddhist politicians for sure, right? Some people that I think embody those values. I'd love that, but it's not appropriate for me to try to project my religious beliefs through the lens of a organization that has a monopoly on violence. Right? That's a slippery slope. It is very dangerous. And I don't understand why this is happening. Now, what I do want to say is what I think is happening here. And what it seems to be is that this is a very coordinated effort. And this is really good. The conservatives are very good at this. Liberals are awful at this. The modern liberals, classical liberals more so, but liberals are terrible at this. But what these conservatives will do is they'll push the Overton window, right? They'll broaden the Overton window into creating more acceptable thought. That way it makes their demands seem more reasonable, right? It's like, well, we're going to ban abortion, but we really want to infuse church and state. And it's like, well, then your compromising place ends up being like, God, just stop, They're just making their demands seem more reasonable by pushing the over window further to the right. Right. And you saw some of that with people like Andrew Yang pushing the Overton window to the left, talking about UBI and things like that. Bernie Sanders talking about universal health care. Like that pushed the Overton window for sure. So we've got a broader Overton window, which really means that you got to have more critical thought. You got to have the capacity to critically think, or else you're going to get captured by some crazies, right, on either side. So we're in a really strange place right now. But when we look at this whole thing, this like separation of church and state conversation is really important because this could lead to real violence. Like putting the government being led by the church. That's like that's a tail wagging the dog situation. Scary, very scary. Laws put on the books, right? Which are laws are really just guidelines for when violence is acceptable or literally like imprisonment, right? Like these are the consequences of laws or imprisonment and violence, right? That's what happens when those things aren't followed. When those are constructed by a mythology, the founding fathers understood that's not a good idea, right? That's not a good idea. They saw that with a monarchy being part of the church. Like that was not a good idea. It led to so many crazy things happen because absolute power corrupts absolutely, and power coagulates. Like I don't even think the yearly prayer breakfast, the presidential prayer breakfast or whatever it's called, I don't think that's appropriate. I think we need secular leadership and then a variety of free belief systems that are allowed to resonate with people as they should, right? I'm pro-freedom. Charlie Kirk is not pro-freedom. Lauren Boebert is not pro-freedom. right? These people they're not pro-freedom. They like to say freedom because when it comes to COVID lockdowns, but they're not pro-freedom. So when you look at this whole thing, I think at the end of the day, we need to be honest about the fact that we don't really know what the founding fathers would have wanted. We don't really know because they're not here, right? We can read their diaries, we can read their letters, we can do all these things, we can read the Constitution, but at the end of the day, we're having to interpret it. And to interpret what somebody else wanted who is no longer here just creates a gigantic opportunity for bias to be the leading factor in our decision-making process. And that goes for the Constitution, that goes for religion, that goes for self-help. It doesn't matter what it is, right? When I listen to Alan Watts, let's just go out here like somewhere neutral. I can really make it what he has to say. If I just pull some quotes, I can make him mean whatever I want him to mean, which can be good or it can be toxic. And having that influence lead the government is a scary, scary thought, but something worth talking about. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. I'm available to hear you. If you think that I'm more attractive than Ben Shapiro, then you should probably subscribe to this YouTube channel. I mean, what other political commentator has this kind of fucking bone structure? Really, let's be serious now. You have to look at these YouTube videos. You have to look at them. Do I need to say anything else? Watch some more of these videos. Subscribe, leave a comment, hit the thumbs up button. This is the only thing keeping me from having to have an OnlyFans. Just to survive. Watch some more content. Hit that thumbs up button.